Shabbat Shalom. My name is daughter Yisrayl Hawkins and Anaya, and I want to say forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. Shalom, everyone. It's now a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl Hawkins now entering the sanctuary. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Welcome to this very special women's presentation. Today's theme is, It Takes Character to Endure. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1 says, Watch what you say and do when you go to the house of Yahweh, and be more ready to listen. So pay attention, have your books of Yahweh, notepads, pens, and pencils ready as we are taught in righteousness. Please stand as I present the first speaker, daughter of Israel, labeled Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech is Obtaining Character through Endurance. The definition of the word endurance from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary is to remain firm under suffering without yielding. A lot of people suffered in the scriptures for righteousness' sake. One of our greatest examples who suffered and endured is Yeshua Messiah, our high priest. Please turn to Hebrews 12, verse 2, found on page 951. Hebrews 12, verse 2, and it reads, Looking to Yeshua, the first, who was led and perfected by the faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the sacrifice, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of Yahweh. The word character means a combination of your morals and beliefs that dictate how you treat yourself, how you treat others, and how you treat the environment. Character is what helps you determine the difference between right and wrong. Yeshua knew the difference between right from wrong because he knew the scriptures. Please turn to Psalms 33, verse 4, found on page 446. Psalms 33, verse 4, and it reads, Yahweh's law is right, and all his works are done in truth. We know that truth is the keeping of Yahweh's laws as written in Psalms 119, verse 142 and 151. Yeshua knew that Yahweh possessed righteous character because Yahweh keeps his own laws, and Yeshua chose to develop that same character. He knew Yahweh's plan was to create mankind to become just like him, which means becoming perfectly righteous in character. Yeshua knew he would be hated, ridiculed, and beaten, and eventually murdered for choosing to become just like Yahweh. He suffered and endured all these things, and now he is sitting at the right hand of Yahweh because he trusted in Yahweh and the Holy Scriptures. In closing, please turn to Philippians 2, verse 5 on page 922. And it reads, Let this mind be in you, which is also in Yeshua Messiah. And with this, I would like to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated.
My name is Shamari, and the title of my speech is A Look Inside. I will be speaking about an important part of who we are, our character. Character is who we are on the inside, what we believe in. It helps us determine whether or not we make right choices. Everyone has character. But what's important is that it's positive. How do we make sure it's positive? We take a look inside. This means to think carefully about the choices we make. Why do we need positive character? Because to remain in Yahweh's house, we must be strong. Our strength comes from Yahweh and the desire to serve Him. Yahweh gives us many opportunities to strengthen our character. One of these is through His prophecies. Yahweh gives us many promises which we may not see immediately, but He is counting on us to believe and trust in Him. Please turn to page 710, Habakkuk 2:3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it seems slow, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not delay. This takes character traits such as self-control, patience, and determination. Patience from the character unit means demonstrating self-control and remaining calm during setbacks. Self-control means not acting impulsively, to think about everything we do or say before we act. Determination means to remain focused, to have strong desire to follow through. All three character traits are necessary to endure in the house of Yahweh and to remain strong until the end, to see prophecies fulfilled. To do this, we must improve our character, and don't forget to take a look inside. Now I'd like to turn it over to daughter of Yisrayl Abel, Galilee, for prayer.
And now I'd like to turn it over to the great queens of the House of Yahweh.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. We would like to welcome you to the women's presentation. Today our theme is It Takes Character to Endure. I would like to share this quote with you. Character determines how we lead our life, how we deal with life's ups and downs, and how we make choices that determine what we become.
Reading from the book of Yahweh, please turn to Philippians 4, verse 8 to 9, from the page 923. That is Philippians 4, verse 8 to 9. Think on these things. Finally, brothers, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of righteous report, if there's any virtue, and if there's any praise, think on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me. Do these, and the peace of Yahweh will be with you.
Sisters, we would like you to think on these things that you are about to hear today. Please do these things so that we can endure all tests and trials.
Please get a pen and paper ready to take notes.
We have an exciting program filled with informative speeches and speakers. So get ready, and with this, I can turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. And it is a great honor to be able to speak out or speak before the called out ones today. And our theme for today is it takes positive character to endure. And my title for today's is The Old Way and the New Way. Yes, we can change our hearts and our minds. And in order to be a 1074 and riding in that van, we have to be humble. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is the character system, or the character books that were given to us to help guide us and direct us in our everyday lives. We actually learned the difference between a personality and a character, which we probably didn't even pay any attention to before. And personality is something that you notice right off about a person, whether they're friendly, whether they're irritated, or whatever. And that's what makes us such a unique individual. Our personality helps govern our feelings, things we choose, our attitude, and our preferences. Like, I've always loved purple. Somebody might always like blue. And I can remember as a child always wanting everything purple. My mom says, no, you don't get everything purple. But now I can get everything purple, and I love it. On the other hand, our character is what helps each and one of us to determine what is right and what is wrong. Character defines us as individuals, and it does depend on our genetics, our family, our values, influences, and we've told to be very careful about the influences and how easy it is to be influenced. It can be subtle or it can be bold. And our experiences. How many in here have really experienced some great tests? But it helped us. It showed us as individuals, how that we and what we need to work on. It helps us in making choices, and it had a lot to do with the environment and the way we were raised. For the first 18 years of my life, there was no television in our home, so I didn't get that influence that the other children I went to school had. We had scriptural reading every night, 1 hour before my dad went to the third shift job he had. My mom sat in one of the goose down rockers, if you know what a goose down rocker is, and my mother sat in the other one. And we sat on the sofa. And she read scriptures, and then she would ask us questions to make sure we were paying attention and listening. And I'm very thankful for that background training. We're all given the opportunity to understand and realize it takes a positive character and to eliminate the negative. We're taught to be careful in what we allow to influence us and how we can become a positive leader. Now, as women in the house of Yahweh, we set the example for the younger girls. So we have to be aware of our thoughts, our actions, our body language, our expressions on our face, because we're guiding and helping direct these young ladies. And I'm thankful to be able to be a part of it. Now we go on to the acceptance unit, which shows us how to accept not only ourselves, but others. Intolerance. Intolerance causes a lot of conflicts, a lot of hurt, and as we see in the world today, a lot of death. We can change this. We don't have to cause conflicts, and we don't have to cause hurt. It's up to us as individuals. We have every tool set before us that we can use to become that perfect person. Not the perfection the world looks at, but the perfection that is set before us to become righteous daughters of Yahweh. We also learned in making a difference and making choices. We know there is only one race, and that is the humankind. And we learned that. And that we're only 0.1 difference in each and every one of us. So we can accomplish this job. And in Ecclesiastes, it even tells us in chapter 3, there's a time to speak up and a time to be silent. And that's what I want to learn, because when I hear or see something that's not right, I feel like I have to report it. Instead of looking at it, evaluating the situation, and realizing, am I making a mountain out of a molehill? This is something that we have to gain. We have to gain that wisdom. And this journey we're on starts with one step, and that is changing ourselves, not changing others. It starts by educating ourselves in the moral principles and understanding what this training is about and gaining the wisdom we need to accomplish it. It helps us, and I love Proverbs chapter 1 because it has a vast amount of knowledge just in the first 7 verses, because it shows us how to sharpen our minds and how that we can be a better person. It even shows us how that we can train children to be better children. As women in the house of Yahweh, we are shown how we as individuals can change ourselves. Now, a woman can either build her house or the house, or she can tear it down. And then we get to self-control. And it's all about controlling ourselves. This thing right here, you can't very well talk without it. You can't very well eat without it. So it's something that we have to learn to control. And it shows in our actions and what we've learned. Then we go to respect. And we've learned that everyone deserves respect. And we have to recognize the value of every person. We don't have to be bullies. We don't have to intimidate people. All we have to do is learn how to control ourselves. And we go on to more. And it gives us step by step. When someone says, well, I'm not quite sure, all we have to do is go back in the books. It shows us step by step how to evaluate each situation. And on page 127, in the respect book, it shows us how to remain in control in difficult situations. Remember, you can't do anything about anyone else. All you can do is change yourself. And how we respond to others. First of all, is remaining calm no matter what. If you're being corrected and the correction is very harsh, accept that correction and know it's something in here that I need to overcome. And be determined and get rid of the negativity. Be polite at all times. You wouldn't realize how much being polite and considerate of one another, how much, because you think about it. When the people come in town, I try to get to every one of them I can. And just 2 words that made a woman cry. Welcome home. We should be this way with everyone. Welcome home. Do you realize that you're holding a winning ticket? Everyone thinks about winning the lottery. We've all thought about it, what we would do, and this and that and the other. And we even thought it would, wow, that would really help the peaceful solution. But we are holding a winning ticket. Don't throw it away. Don't give it to someone else because it's your ticket. And that ticket is more valuable than all the money in the world. And with this today, I thank you. And I hope I've encouraged, because I need that encouragement myself. So I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Today, my topic is following the example of the one sent. The Great One sent in these last days has been showing us many ways we can overcome through our tests and trials. And through his example, we know that we must develop the positive character traits that he has. I'd like to share with you a few steps on how we can become just like the Great One sent. So, he stood strong through the test. When the world brought out lies and arrested him, and brought out false charges, he stood strong and keeps a smile on his face through the persecution, as he said, "I love the work of Yahweh." And we know that the pastor is always seeking Yahweh's presence, and when we seek Yahweh's presence, Yahweh gives us strength. Moving on, he is always rejoicing. He always has a smile on his face when he comes up to speak. Even if you are upset or down, you still have joy in your heart for Yahweh, and it never leaves. If you turn over to Philippians chapter 4 and verse 4 through 7, it says, "Rejoice in Yahweh always. Again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known to all men. Yahweh is at hand. Be anxious about nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to Yahweh. And the peace of Yahweh, which surpasses all understanding, will keep your hearts and minds through Yeshua Messiah." In the third book of Israel, chapter 18, verse 51, Pastor says, verse 6, "In this you rejoice greatly. Yes, we have setbacks. Yahweh says a righteous man stumbles 7 times, but he gets up and goes on. But he watches it the next time. I told several people yesterday that I was sure they did the best they could, and I meant that. I'm sure you did the best you could under what I've taught you. So far, you're finding out how hard it is. You can learn by your mistakes, and this is what you're going to have to do." So we know tests get hard sometimes, but Pastor still keeps a smile on his face through them and teaches us how we can do the same. Okay, moving on, he never gives up. And as he hopes in Yahweh, Yahweh gives him strength. We should always remember to pray to Yahweh and ask him for guidance so we can stay strong like the one sent. If you turn over to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10, it says, "Finally, my brothers, strengthen yourselves in Yahweh and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to stand against the wiles, crafty ways, schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not only against flesh and blood, but also against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual forces of the evil one in the heavens. Therefore take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having overcome all, to stand." Okay, moving on, he writes constantly. Pastor constantly gives us and provides us with all we need. He feeds us spiritual and physical food. He always teaches and writes for us, so we will know how we can develop the positive character traits that he has. In Yahaqob chapter 4 and verse 34, it says, "Yeshua said to them, 'My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work.'" And then in chapter 6, verse 27, it says, "Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you. because Yahweh the Father has sealed him. And through the 1 cent example, we must strive to be just like him. He has given us all we need, but all we need to do is follow his guidance. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to the next teacher.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech today is We Can't Turn Back Now. On page 15 of the intermediate character unit, it gives us the definition of steadfast. And it means we are determined not to give up or change what we have set out to accomplish. Now, this is a character trait that Father Yahweh has been developing within us for years, right? And it probably started the very first day that you heard about the House of Yahweh. Now, since we're so close to the feast, I thought that I would share my story of how I learned about the House of Yahweh. Now, I know that a lot of you maybe have heard this before, but I have a captive audience, so you're going to hear it again. The year was 1984, and my mother was reading a national news magazine. And in the back of the magazine, there was an ad that said, "The Creator has a name. Few know it. Right." Now, we had stopped attending Mass several years before that because we knew that something wasn't right with the Catholic Church. We couldn't figure out quite what it was, but we knew we didn't want to be a part of it anymore. So we wrote in, and we started receiving the monthly mailings and the audio cassette tapes. Yes, the cassette tapes. And we really enjoyed them. We would wait for them in the mail every week. And the message that Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins taught us was something that we had never heard before. We kept the Sabbath at home for about 4 years. And in the spring of 1988, we received an invitation to go to the House of Yahweh for the Feast of Pentecost. And I remember the conversation in my house at that time, and we were thinking, should we go? Should we stay? What should we do? And the decision was made that we were going to go. So we packed up all our things and what we thought we would need, and we hit the road to Abelin, Texas. And I remember that 1,350-mile trip very well. It was a very long trip, but it was very well worth it. Everything was going really well on the trip until we crossed the Texas state line. And my father, who was driving, became seriously ill. And so much so that we had to pull off to the side of the road. And there was talk about turning back, about not going. And I remember my mother saying, "Listen, we've come this far. We cannot turn back now." So, fast forward about 30 years or so, and I still hear those words ringing in my head daily. We've come this far. We cannot turn back now. Now, I know that we all have faced a lot of adversity, trials, and struggles since we came to the House of Yahweh. But remember the definition of steadfast? It means that we're determined not to give up or change what we have set out to accomplish. In the third book of Yisrayl, there's a quote that I would like to read to you. It says, "Yahweh has called you out of this world. If he lets something come upon you, it's something for you alone. And that's the reason it's coming upon you. He allows these tests to come upon you. He says, don't be weary of them. They're here to build you to perfection with endurance and to make sure that you won't turn and go the other way. So he allows these tests to come upon us to make sure that we won't go back to Egypt, that we won't pull the vehicle over and get out. Like Pastor says, you can get out if you want to, but you don't have to. You can stay here. I looked up the definition of the word test on dictionary.com. And it says a procedure intended to establish the quality, performance, or reliability of something, especially before it's taken into widespread use. I was kind of interested. It was interesting that I had never actually Googled that word before. And I thought that it was quite profound, because that's what our tests are for. Our tests are to establish the quality, and our performance and our reliability of being able to do Yahweh's work for here and for all eternity. Now, Yahweh has a big job for us, and we can't grow weary of the tests. And we can't get scared and turn the other way. Now, it's really funny because this morning I woke up and I was like, oh, I can't teach today. I was like, okay, I'm going to just call her up and say, okay, I can't do this. And then I read through my speech and I said, okay, this is for me. We've come this far. We can't turn back now. And at this time, I'll turn the portion over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech is Who We Are. We hear a lot about physically and spiritually preparing for situations, but today we're going to talk about the mental. I want to start off by comparing our minds to the Middle East. Why, you may ask? Because our mind is kind of like the battlefield. There's two voices in our heads. One voice is saying what you should do, and the other voice is telling you what you want to do. I want you to turn over, please, to Romans 8, verse 7. Romans 8, verse 7, found on page 879. It says, because the carnal mind is an enmity bitterly opposed to Yahweh. Our carnal mind is at enmity with Yahweh. What must you do? Well, that leads us to my next point, which is mental discipline. What is mental discipline? Well, let's first start off by asking ourselves, what is discipline? Discipline is a practice of training people to obey rules or code of behavior. In my research of mental discipline, they emphasize that the key is to value it enough to actually try to change your way of thinking. Keeping in mind the VIP, value, imitate, and practice. So what does this have to do with mental discipline? Mental discipline is just like physical discipline. If you think about people who want to lose weight or simply just want to eat healthier, they discipline themselves by having certain diets, eating certain things. Or for people who don't get enough sleep, they discipline themselves by doing what they need to do so they can get to bed early and get that proper amount of sleep. Mental discipline is just like that. You do what you need to do in order to achieve your goals. Which leads me back to what you value, you imitate, and you practice. We all know this ties back into influences. What we watch, read, and listen to, it all ties back in together to what we value, we imitate, we practice, and then ultimately what we become. So what are some things we should value? A couple weeks ago in Pastor's speech, he ended a certain part of his speech. He ended it by saying, I want you to learn to love studying. Learn to love studying. And he said that numerous of times, but this time it just really stuck out and clicked to me. And I thought to myself, do I love studying? And if not, what can I do to learn to love studying? Now remember, the key is that you have to value it enough to try to actually change your way of thinking. So how can you change your mind to actually love to study? Well, welcome to engineering class. We're going to learn how to rewire your brain. Step number 1,
what to study. We know we have an overload amount of knowledge. We have so much that some people say they actually schedule, what they're going to read. They read the Mark of the Beast on second day, or they schedule it so they are able to get as much information as they can. Number 2, why should you value it? You should value it because it not only offers you eternal life, but it's ultimately the only hope for mankind. Number 3, make it fun. You're probably looking at me like, why should you make it fun? Because in order to learn things, sometimes you have to make it interesting. For me, I love concordances, highlighters, pens, and for me, when I cross-reference, I just feel smarter. I don't know why, but I just see all this information, I just feel smarter. And also, I want to bring to remembrance the Bring the Light and Race to the Kingdom activities, the things that Yahweh has given us to actually refresh our minds, to be able to see how well we are in not just the scriptures, but the facts about the House of Yahweh. And the 4th one is consistency. A lot of times we make plans, we are diligent the first 2 weeks, and then we become slack. Now, keep in mind Isaiah 34:16, where it says, "Search out the book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these be neglected." When you slack, you're neglecting it. So we have the information, we change our mind, we change our mind by thinking, we see the value, we imitate it, we consistently do it, we practice it by being thankful, being patient, and it ultimately becomes a habit. Now with studying, the tests become harder. You get tested in your faith, your understanding, and then ultimately your ability to teach what you've learned. Now we know that just like people, our tests are different, they're unique. But one thing we can all say is that no matter how different our tests are, we can learn from them and they make us stronger. Remember Yahshua 1 verse 9 that says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. I want to throw back to the 15th of the day of the 3rd month and this of 2018. This was the day that the missionary team went to Arkansas. We started teaching around 9 o'clock in the morning in an auditorium, which that first can be a test to teach in an auditorium. And we had classes going all day nonstop. Now, this was ultimately our toughest class. Not only was this the last day before spring break, but there was a lot of people. And the children, they kind of talked to each other a lot. And I was the second to last teacher. And as I got down, the last teacher went up, and she had about 5 or 10 minutes, and she had completed that class. And as soon as she got down, one of the instructors came to us, and they said, they have just added 20 more minutes to our class. We're looking at her like, are you serious? 20 more minutes? And something similar occurred to us earlier that day, where they got the times mixed up. So what the four of us did was we sat at the end of the stage and we actually talked with the students. They asked us questions, talked about why we were interested in the program, what some of our struggles were, and then we shared things that helped us with our struggles. So we thought we were going to do the same thing with this class, except the only difference was in the class before, there was 50 to 100 students. This class, there was over 400 students. So this is when it became interesting because, we expected the students to ask us questions, but not only did the students ask us questions, the teachers asked us questions, the drama instructors asked us questions, everyone was asking these questions. And this is when it really came to mind how important our tests are. Because our tests not only help us, but they help us to help others. We can help others through our tests. So our tests prepare us and strengthen us for other things that are going to come. It ultimately prepares us for a position in Yahweh's kingdom. With our tests, we become stronger. Mental discipline, we tried harder. Studying makes us approved, and we are the saints of Yahweh who endure forever. That's who we are. And with this, I'll turn over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May be seated. Are we rejoicing on this great Sabbath day? Hope so. If not, I'm going to show you how you got the power to change that. Our thoughts govern our lives. From the beginning of time, life as we know it is what we make of it. Every thought we think determines the outcome of our lives. Every thought we think opens an infinite amount of doors, and it shuts an infinite amount of doors. At any point, we can change the direction of our lives with a simple thought. Thoughts, values, choices, you. The thoughts we think determines whether or not we will endure. Now, we all know that tests and trials are hard, right? They're not easy, especially when you're dealing with others, getting along with people, dealing with words of others, or going through whatever we're going through, especially our thoughts. Thinking we're not great enough, or we can't do this, or thinking that we are better than others, or we know best. Why should we listen to authorities? What would they know? Our thoughts can either hurt us or they can help us. Think on this. Yahweh created us with a single thought. Yahweh says that he has called us to succeed, as it says in Isaiah 48:15-17. Yahweh doesn't lie, so we should know that we can do it too. The things we go through, we can change with a thought. Your thoughts govern your actions, and it's the most powerful tool you have. Changing your thoughts takes education, discipline, determination, patience, consistency, and definitely effort. Here are a few ways that can help you change your thoughts. Number 1, stop being stuck and stubborn. The easy way to endure is to stop being stubborn and let Yahweh take control. Realize that it is the way that Yahweh wants it to be, the way it's supposed to be, and stop bucking up against authority. 2, as it says in Deuteronomy 17:9, seek guidance and get educated. Seek guidance from those in authority, like your counselors, for example. They're there for a reason. They're there for us. Don't think adults don't care. Believe me, they do. They've been where we are. They want to see us succeed. And when they get stern with us, it's not because they don't care, it's because they do. And if they're not correcting us, that's when we should get scared. Number 3, know what you value and stand for it. As it says in the character unit on page 6, where it talks about values, instead of thinking on the things that will hinder you from reaching your full potential, think on the things that will help you succeed. If you have your mind set on the things of the world, like leaving and worldly entertainment and wanting to become famous, you're going to fail. And when you leave, your problems leave with you. They'll follow you, and your eternal life will leave with you too. We should have our minds set on becoming Yahweh's everlasting righteousness and the goals we want to reach. Number 4, set goals. Goals are a great reminder and helper in getting through things. When you know what you want and you're determined to get it, it will help you push through to get it. Number 5, set your mind in advance. Setting your mind in advance is very important, to know in advance how you're going to handle a situation, how you're going to avoid negativity, and stand up for what is right. I can tell you the best way to avoid negativity is to bury yourself in the work of Yahweh. Number 6, accept it. These tests get easier when we learn to just accept it. That this is where Yahweh wants us at this time, and to stop bucking up and let Yahweh take control. It's helping bring us to perfection. Look at the bigger picture. Look at the things that are coming. Look forward to the things that are coming and rejoice in it. Number 7, laugh. Most importantly, laugh. And we learn in the self-control unit on page 37 about how to deal with stress, overcoming stress. And laughing is the best medicine. You could always fake it till you make it too. Someone once told me that if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So it's better to laugh than to get stuck in the pit as woe is me, because we all know that that pit is so wonderfully hard to get out of. It is what it is, so you might as well smile and know that you can do it. Now, let's recap. Number 1, stop being stuck and stubborn. Number 2, seek guidance and get educated. Number 3, know what you value and stand for it. Number 4, set goals. 5, set your mind in advance. 6, accept it. And lastly, and most importantly, laugh. We make life up with the thoughts that we think. The thoughts that we think leads to our choices. Our choices stem from what we value. And what we value determines whether or not we will endure. And whether or not we endure determines where we will end up. And where we end up is how we will be remembered. I hope you learned something, got something from this. And with this, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
You may be seated. This room is a lot bigger than the one I'm used to. The title of my speech today is 5 Minutes at a Time. When I was asked to do this speech, every thought fell completely out of my head. Completely. It was blank. There was nothing in there. I could not put two thoughts together that made any sense. So when I was sitting down last night and just kind of going over everything again, and I was just like, I don't understand why I can't figure this out. I mean, I love the peaceful solution. I love Yahweh. Why can't I just talk about them? You would think it'd be easy. Apparently it wasn't for me last night. So I fell to my knees, and that's dramatic. I didn't actually fall because that would hurt, but I got down on my knees and I prayed to Yahweh. And I was just like, please, I just need a couple of thoughts. So I sat back down, and all of a sudden my dog fell off the back of my couch, and I mean, she hit. The floor shook, and she's only 6.5 pounds, okay? I jumped out of the chair. I thought my heart was going to jump out of my body, and I scooped her up, and I was just like, are you okay? Are you all right? You know, I think she was just as scared as I was, and her eyes were like as big as saucers, and I was talking to her, trying to calm her down, and I didn't want her to be scared of the couch. So I was like, okay, so, you know, we're going to do this. This is the couch. It is not a bad couch. You just rolled. It's not as big as you think it is. So I was like, I sat her down in front of the couch, and I was like, let's go back to the beginning. Here's the front, here's the seat, here's the back. And she had no problem. She jumped, she got back up there, and she was perfectly fine. I, on the other hand, just started laughing hysterically because it hit me. Let's go back to the beginning. Why not? So let's go to Genesis chapter 4 and verse 7. And it says, if you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it. I had to thank my dog for helping me, and I had to thank Yahweh. She kind of looks at me like, you're welcome, but please don't let it wait so long that I fall off again. So I was like, okay. The adversary has been around a lot longer than we have, and she's been perfecting her deception of this world and pushing it out to everyone, making things look fun and exciting, but they're risky behaviors, molding mankind into her likeness. Since we're starting at the beginning, I want to read from the character book, and it's on page 4, and it says, character. Everybody has it, but where does it come from? Our character defines what is important to us, what we believe in, and how we treat others, just as clearly as our faces and voices define who we are physically. In fact, our character is an integral part of who we are. So let's think about it for a minute. What is important to us? And really think about it. Is it our neighbor and what they're doing? If not, then why do we talk about it? What about the latest technology? Are we using it for righteous reasons? If not, then why is it so important to have cell phones and iPads and laptops and all of these devices that you can't use all at the same time unless you're really talented, and I'm not that person. But what about our worldly families? Are they important to us? And if not, then why do we still fellowship with them? Why do we still seek them out? So really think about it. What is important to us? Is it Yahweh? Is it His family, which is our family? Is it His work, His law? If we say yes to this, are we taking the time to make time for Yahweh every day? That's the struggle, right? We get so busy, so caught up in our daily activities that sometimes we just lose that time. We forget that we still have a duty to Yahweh. But then how does Yahweh know that He is important to us? Now, we can't just say, oh, it's Yahweh, He knows. He knows me, He knows everything. He knows my heart, He knows my intentions, He knows everything about me. It doesn't work that way. Yahweh wants us to prove to Him that we love Him more than all else. He never said it was going to be easy. In fact, in 1 Kepha 4, 12 and 13, it says, "Beloved, do not be amazed concerning the fiery trial you will undergo in order to be tested, as though some alien thing were befalling you, but rejoice in the fact that you are partakers of the Messiah's sufferings, that when His glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy." So He tells us right off, it's not going to be a walk in the park. You are going to be tested, so don't be surprised when it takes place. We all are going through different things, every one of us, but we have to prove to Yahweh that we can do it. We got this. So what does the word endure mean? That we can endure all things. In the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it says to undergo especially without giving in, to regard with acceptance or tolerance, to remain firm under suffering or adversity without yielding. So enduring is standing for what we believe in no matter what, even if we're standing alone. In the self-control unit on page 158 through 160, it gives the building blocks to a respectful reputation. Now those blocks are self-control, discipline, consistency, purpose and goals, education, and determination. Now all of these blocks have something in common. They're all positive character traits. And they do more than just give you a positive reputation, but they also give you a solid foundation that we can grow upon. As we educate ourselves in the law that we know we're going to be tested, so how do we go about obtaining those goals just a little bit easier? 5 minutes at a time. Someone once told me that I had no short-term goals, and I was like, wait, what? And they're like, most people have short-term goals and long-term goals. You have long-term goals and long-term goals. I was like, oh. So 5 minutes at a time. Let's take not saying the days of the week. Be disciplined, be determined, and consistent. We are not going to say these things for 5 minutes at a time. Once you've reached that goal, do it again, and again, and again. And before you know it, you've formed a habit, and you're not saying those things anymore. And that's one less thing that Satan can't hit you with. In 1 Corinthians 10, 13 through 14, it says, "There is no temptation taken a hold of you except what is common to man. And Yahweh is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also make a way of escape, that you are able to bear it." Now I want you to look at the person next to you. Look at the person behind you. What about the one all the way across the room? We are not alone. We have each and every one of us to help each other go through this together. And in closing, Con Levi said a few Sabbaths ago that we've been at this for so long. Why do you doubt yourself now? Why do you doubt yourself now? Live this life knowing we will succeed. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech today is Be Strong, Be Courageous. Now, let me see a show of hands. How many of you have ever had to rescue someone from a burning building? Wow, I don't see one hand. Or maybe you've had to jump into a raging river and save someone who's being swept away. Now, it would take a lot of courage to be able to do something like that. But that's not the type of courage that I'm going to be talking about today. The courage I'm talking about is more than just accomplishing a one-time physical feat. I'm referring to the positive character trait of courageous and how we can be determined to remain in the house of Yahweh and make a right choice to continue enduring until the end. The definition of courageous from the Building Moral Excellence Unit on page 20 means the act of doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid. Now, the examples that I gave earlier are just one-time acts of courage. But in Yahweh's house, we need the trait of courageous every single day. It takes a lot of courage to be able to stand up and stay in the house of Yahweh and face your tests and trials day after day. Rescuing someone from a burning building would be easy compared to that. These tests and trials are not meant to bring us down, and they're not meant to make us feel weary. They are to help strengthen and encourage each and every one of us to keep going so we can have that position in Yahweh's kingdom. So, what does it mean to have mental courage? Being mentally courageous means consistently being aware of our thoughts and how we are being influenced. Satan's goal is to try to put these negative thoughts in our minds to turn us away from Yahweh. She is trying her very best to do this. And we all have went through this mental battle at times, but the reason why we go through these things is to see for Yahweh to see if we will have the courage to stand up for what is right and be strong. The reason why we go through these tests and trials, or as the Peaceful Solution calls them, these curveballs and pitfalls, is to see if we will have a positive attitude, set our minds in advance so we know how to handle the situation before it arises. And of course it won't always be easy, but tests aren't supposed to be easy. In the acceptance unit, page 33, it says this: doing what is right is not always easy, and you will have to be courageous. Yes, we will have to be courageous. And in the character unit, page 83, it tells us to stand up for what is morally correct, even if you are the only one left standing. This takes a lot of courage because, of course, it may not always be the most popular thing to do, and you may lose a friend or two standing up for what is right. But what matters is that you did the right thing and you set that positive example for others to follow. And we can do this. We can have this mental courage. Now, there is a physical courage that we need to have as well. And Yahweh tells us that we will be facing the worst time of trouble ever, which will be the nuclear burning. And in Isaiah chapter 43, Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2, it says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, nor will the flame kindle upon you." Did you see that? We will walk through the fire, but we won't be burned. We know that this fire is speaking of the nuclear burning. But why won't we be burned? Because we will have Yahweh's protection from keeping his laws. Yahweh tells us that we must prepare for what is to come, but we are not to fear it. And the more we dwell on the fact that Yahweh is with us and he will encamp around his house, the more it should give us the courage and strength to go through this time period. And in Psalms chapter 91, in verse 5 through 10, it says, "You will not be afraid of the terror of night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. Only with your eyes will you look and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made Yahweh your refuge, because you have made the Most High your house, the house of Yahweh. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your dwelling." By having this physical courage, it comes from understanding the times we are living in and having the knowledge to prepare for them in advance, as the Peaceful Solution talks about. Being prepared helps us to be courageous because we have that plan of action and we know what to do. Remember, in Yeshua chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or become discouraged, for Yahweh your Father is with you wherever you go." If we are courageous and remain in Yahweh's house, we have nothing to fear because Yahweh will be with us. And in closing, I'm going to read 2 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 11. It says, "Finally, brothers, farewell. Be perfect, be of great courage. Be in unity, live in peace, and Yahweh, who is love and peace, will be with you." May Yahweh bless your understanding, and now I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. My title today is "If Yeshua Did It, Can We?" Yeshua had all of the positive character traits. He showed by his character that he was perfect for the position of giving his life to save mankind. The first character trait I would like to touch on that Yeshua had is self-control. If you can turn over to page 730 in your book of Yahweh. That's Matithia chapter 4. Here it's where Satan tempts Yeshua. And he was hungry, he was fasting. Down in verse 3 he says, "She said, 'If you are the Son of Yahweh, command that these stones be turned into bread.' But he answered and said, 'It is written, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh.' Then the devil took him up into the holy city. And she said, 'If you are the Son of Yahweh, throw yourself down, for it is written, for he will give his Malachim charge concerning you to keep you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands, if you should strike your foot against a stone.' And Yeshua said to her, 'It is also written, you must not test Yahweh your Father.' Again the devil took him up into the exceedingly high mountains and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the magnificence of them. And he said to him, 'I will give you all these things if you fall down and worship me.' Then Yeshua said to her, 'You get away from me, Satan, for it is written, Yahweh your Father you must reverence, and him only you must serve.' Then the devil left him." So keep in mind that he had self-control and was knowledgeable of the scriptures. So that's why Satan left him. Another character trait Yeshua had, he was steadfast and persistent. In the character unit, page 15, it gives the definition. It means you are determined not to give up or change what you have set out to accomplish. Throughout his entire life, he only chose Yahweh's way and never swayed. And we should have that same attitude too. Also, Yeshua was humble, and that was one of his strongest character traits. He was given so much power to heal the sick and raise the dead, but he never used it to abuse others, but only to serve and benefit. Yeshua was also very obedient. The Great One Sent, Yisrayl Hawkins, said that Yeshua came to perfection, as we are striving to do now, by his suffering and his obedience to Yahweh. So keep in mind that it is up to us to apply these traits to our lives. Remember, self-control is the foundation of all positive moral character. Also, humility and obedience, which is part of the feast theme. Obedience is a true test of your self-control. It takes strength to obey. Keep in mind, obedience and humility leads to righteousness. If you can turn over to Colossians 3, it's found on page 927. to 14. It says, "Therefore, as the elect of Yahweh, holy and beloved, put on compassion, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering. Be patient with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against you, just as the Messiah forgave you, you also must forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection." We are all striving to become perfect just as Yeshua, and he has showed us that it is possible to live without sin. So remember, your character plays a big role in your endurance, and Yeshua did it, so we can too. And with this, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title for my speech today is "You Control the Outcome." Now, I want you to think, Yahweh is in full control. So how can you control the outcome? I want to take us back to Deuteronomy 30, verse 15 through 19, where Yahweh says that he gives us two choices. You have life by righteousness or death by destruction. But he also tells us that we are free moral agents. What has the Peaceful Solution taught us about the word morals? Morals are rules and guidelines. So Yahweh has gave us this standard by which our lives are to be set. Which standard are we living by? Okay, now I want to read from Yahaqob on page 953, Yahaqob 1, verse 2 through 4. And he says, "My brothers, count it all joy when you fall into various temptations, trials, knowing that the testing of your faith develops endurance, and let endurance have its perfect work, that you may become perfect and complete, lacking nothing." So, what are we enduring for? What is our whole plan? This standard that we're living by. Why are we living by this standard? What is this standard? Now, think about the House of Yahweh as a family. We're a family. We're one big family spread across the whole globe. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Families have issues. Families have problems. Families don't always get along. That is the open, plain, honest fact. And as a House of Yahweh being this huge family, not only do we have normal family problems and issues that go on, that we struggle to get along, we rub each other the wrong way, we also have culture differences. We also have different backgrounds. We have different experiences. We have all of this that you throw into one big family. And Yahweh says, you can do this, you can get along. And we're all thinking, okay. But we can. Yahweh tells us that we can. And Yahaqob reminds us this. Count it all joy when we fall into various temptations and trials. Count it all joy. But woe to the person that the test comes through. But count it all joy, because they're going to end up getting that backlash if we're not controlling ourselves. Hey, I want to remind us of the G-facy that we've learned all the way back in the character unit of the Peaceful Solution. Our genetics, our family values, our influences, our environment, our choices, our experiences. Go into our genetics. We all come from different backgrounds, but you throw us all together and somehow Yahweh makes it work. Because there's something in each and every one of us that we contribute that completes his plan, where we can work together as a unit. Now, when we get into our family values is what's important to you on an individual. But a family value is what is important to everyone in your family. So whenever we get along, or we're in a work area, or we're working with one another, and even our daily activities, we don't only have to focus on what's important to us, what's important to our family unit as a whole. Now, let me pose this question to you. If you had a brother, an uncle, a father, and he was in a situation where he got sawed in two, or he was beheaded, or he was tortured all night, and he went through long lengths to write you a letter, would you not search to the ends of the world to find that letter? Would you not do everything you can for what this man went through to get to this that he gave it to us?
think about that. Our family isn't just who exists right now. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Yochanan, Yeshua the Messiah, all of these are our brothers and even our sisters who went through much trials, much struggles to get us the book of Yahweh. The letters that they wrote to us. How much effort do we put into studying every day? Someone recently said, they didn't. I said, well, I read my prophetic words. I read the book of Israel. I'm reading something. And they said, but Isaiah didn't say read something. He said, search out the book of Yahweh. Search out what I say, and this is how you will get eternal life. This is how you will get understanding. And if you've ever gone through a time where you didn't study for a period and then you studied, I don't know about you, but everything just seems easier when I study. My mind is focused. I'm sharp. I recognize this as an issue that I need to deal with. I get through it. I move on, and I go on to my next job. It's not so hard. It's not so difficult when we're studying. So remember, it might seem hard because we live very busy lives. But by setting that time aside, it makes life a whole lot easier in the long run. Yahweh gave us a way to endure this last day's time period. Now, going into our influences, we can't always control what influences surround us. Depending on where you go, you have no control over it. But we can control what we allow to get into our minds. We can control what we allow our minds to focus on at any given time, in any given situation. And then our environment. The environment that we work in, are we creating a peaceful environment? Or are we putting off vibes where nobody really wants to get around you? Or if you've ever been in a situation where you say, be very careful when you talk to that person because it's really close to feast, right? We all get in those modes by feast, okay? Everyone's stressed, everyone's pressed, and we're all on, we're on pins and needles wondering how they're going to take this situation. Considering the environment of our family that we get along with, how are we interacting with them? Are we making their lives peaceful, or are our own inner struggles affecting those around us? Then our choices can be small or they can be large, but our choices affect the outcome of our lives. What you do when you're young, you think it's a small choice, it can impact you for the rest of your life. So be very careful and be educated, because I tell you, social media is the devil. It can influence your mind and sway you to think that something is so easy, it's so simple, but it can cause so much damage. Because I tell you, I never knew how many insecurities I had until I went on Instagram. They create things in your mind to make you think that you have to live up to a certain standard, that you have to fit this bill, that you have to do this, and you have to feel like this, and you should have this amount of money. And if you don't have over 1,000 followers, you're a nobody. Well, anyone in the House of Yahweh, I can tell you, we have 2 billion followers somewhere. So you're the most amazing people in this world if we can keep it together in the long run. Then go through our experiences. Everyone has a different story of how they got here. Some of us don't even have a story. I was 2 years old. But I have the experiences that I went through in Yahweh's house. And what caused me to choose to stay here. And that's the important thing for young people. That just because you didn't choose to be here, eventually that choice comes. And you have to make that choice. And it has to be for you. And it's so important, parents, that we're giving our children the information that they need to make that choice, to know why they stand here, to know what they stand for. You can't stand up for anything, even if you're the only one left standing, if you have no idea what you're standing for. You have to know what it is the House of Yahweh stands for. Who is the House of Yahweh? Who are you? Who am I? All of us together have the same goal and the same purpose. We're all running the same race of endurance. Okay, now going on, I want to go over to, in the acceptance unit on page 37, keeping along with this family unit. Families don't always get along, and sometimes we have issues with one another, and sometimes we have issues within ourselves that causes us to counteract with other people. But on the acceptance unit on page 37, it's entitled, It's All About Forgiveness. It's all about forgiveness. It says another important aspect of dealing with intolerance is to be willing to forgive others when they're intolerant towards you, or when they don't have an accepting of the situation, or when you're not always getting along, or something's going on in that situation. And here's the important thing. It says, deal with your feelings of hurt and disappointment appropriately
by talking to a trusted adult or going to our counselors or talking to someone who can help us work through these emotions. I know a lot of people say when you're going through something, throw yourself in the work. That is the most important thing you can do, but don't forget to deal with your feelings. Because if you throw yourself in the work and your mind is focused here, that emotion is still there somewhere. And if we're not dealing with it, it just festers and it gets bigger and it gets bigger until one day somebody does something and everything of the last 20 years explodes, and it's this one person that is responsible for every bad thing that ever occurred in our entire life. When really, it's because we didn't deal with that emotion that started way back when. We just let it build and build. So remember that getting involved in the work is so important, focusing our mind, but deal with these emotions. And Yahweh has given us counselors, He's given us studying, He's giving us classes to be able to identify our emotions so that we can deal with them and move on. And someone recently told me that when dealing with empathy, before you can have empathy for someone else, you have to identify how you're feeling. If you have no idea how you're feeling, how can you feel what someone else is feeling? Keeping that in mind, it helps us in the long run to achieve our main goal. Now I want to read a quote from the overseer in the 15th book of Israel, chapter 19, verse 25. He says, this training for the kingdom, each time you stumble, or maybe you don't stumble, maybe you pass with flying colors, each time you pass one of these tests, it qualifies you for a higher job. And we are still running this race, and we're qualifying for these jobs that are going to take over this earth after it crashes, and it's going to be very soon. So remember, every time we're going through something, especially as it gets closer to feast, it seems like everything just piles on top of each other and it all hits us at once. There's a reason for it all. Like a few speakers before me said, someone else can learn from our experiences. If we don't go through it, how could we help someone else? If we don't know how to strengthen our faith and we don't study, how can we help someone else strengthen their faith? If we're holding on to things and not getting rid of them so that we can move past and become what Yahweh wants us to be, how could we help someone else do the same job that we are not able to fulfill at this time? Now, flipping over to Yahaqob 2, and I'm just going to jump around, but it's from verse 14 to 24. And he says, what does it profit, my brothers, if a man says he has faith but does not have works? The faith is not able to save him. And one of you say to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things that are needed for the body. What does it profit? In the same way, the faith, if it does not have works, is dead, being alone. Yes, a man may say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. That is how people know who we are. You can walk into a building and they know exactly who you are by the way you dress, by the way you act. I've even gone into where I work, going into a customer's house, and they can tell you right off you're a Yahweh person. And the first thing they say is, this is what I have done. Do you have any Yahweh friends that can do this job for me? Because they know that Yahweh's people are honest. We have a standard. We have a standard of perfection that we all live by, and that's how we know who we are. But we have to remember that faith without works. We can do the job, we can do the works all day long, but what is our faith? Are we confidently believing in the one sent? Is it full confidence in Yahweh and His plan? Do we know where we fit in? We have to make the plan of Yahweh so real to us. Everyone around me always gets so annoyed with me, but I always say that. The plan of Yahweh has to be so real to us. When we read the scriptures, these people have to be real to us. They're our family. They're not just people in a book that went through these things. They're real. They experienced this, and we can relate to them, because one day, somebody's going to be reading our story in a book. And how did we deal with it? How did we grow so that they can learn from what we're doing? Keeping that in mind. We don't just live for us. We live for the 2 billion that are to come. We live for those who are suffering so that they can have a better life in the future in Yahweh's kingdom. Okay, and I want to close by reading in 2 Kepha chapter 3, verse 17 through 18, and it says, you therefore, beloved, since you know these things beforehand, be aware that none of you fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the error of the wicked. We know what's coming. We've been prepared for years mentally, but still some of us are doubting. We allow doubt to enter into our minds, and we have to constantly remind ourselves why we're here. The adversary can give us 1.5 million reasons why we should go to the world, why it's not so bad. So I want you to think about it. When you are in a struggle and you're thinking, all the reasons you shouldn't be in the world, think about all the reasons you should be in the house of Yahweh. Reverse that way of thinking, because you can always find something that's wrong. You can always find something you would to change. But if we remember why we're here, we'll accept that Yahweh will work everything else out. And it says, but grow in truth and knowledge in Yahweh through our Savior, Yeshua Messiah. Even though Yahweh is in full control, we know this, we believe this, Yahweh gave us a standard of living. And if we apply by that standard, in the end, we control the outcome of where we fall in Yahweh's plan. With that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. So, by now you know we've been talking about endurance and character, and yes, they go hand in hand. Rather than focusing on one or two character traits, I want to turn our attention to the culmination of all positive character traits in our goal to endure in Yahweh's house and to receive the promises. My title today is Endurance Comes Through Integrity. Let's look at page 18 of the character unit where it talks about integrity. Integrity is the end result of internalizing positive character traits that can clearly be seen in your actions and attitude. Integrity means being true to Yahweh. By keeping His laws, we develop honesty, we develop compassion, we develop mercy and forgiveness. When we develop integrity, our thoughts and words are in line with Yahweh. Our actions and principles align with His laws. When we develop integrity, our conduct will speak for itself more eloquently than words ever could. It becomes the basis of both reputation and self-respect. Integrity demands courage but delivers untroubled sleep. It is the end goal of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program and also the Great Plan of Yahweh. Integrity is a powerful word from which we get other words like integrate and integral. It describes two or more things merged together to create a more stable whole. For example, two or more metals can be joined together to create a much more stronger metal. Steel, which is a compound of iron, carbon, and several other alloys, is stronger than iron in its pure state. So strong that it's able to sustain the long-term use for high-rise buildings for many, many years. Integrity is much the same. It is not a behavior, but rather a combination of traits that enables us to make right decisions 100% of the time. The question is, which combination of traits should we acquire, and where do we get these traits from? I want you to take a look at Genesis 1:26. Then Yahweh said, I will make man in my image, according to my likeness. They will have rulership over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And when he talks about my image, what image is that? Exodus 34:6-7. Yahweh passed in front of him and proclaimed, Yahweh, Yahweh, Almighty, merciful, compassionate, long-suffering, and abounding in righteousness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Our purpose is to be made in the image of Yahweh, to acquire His character and thereby gain integrity. Yahweh's character is complete. He lacks nothing, and therefore He too endures. Integrity is the cornerstone of endurance. Yahweh endures. For 6,000 years, He's watched His creation go from the perfection of which He created it to what it is today. Sickness of body and mind, of all living things, confusion, perversion, and war in all aspects, and yet he waits. He waits for the revealing of the sons of man. He waits for us to be made in his perfect image. He waits for his plan to come to completion. Just as he endures, we must endure. We endure misunderstandings with each other. We endure the ups and downs of overcoming in the battles of our carnal minds. We also endure the sad state the world is in today and the knowledge of the greater suffering that is soon to come. Only our integrity, our being remade in the image of Yahweh, will keep us in his great house. Psalms 91, 8 and 10. Only with your eyes you would look and you will see the reward of the wicked. No evil will befall you, nor any plague come near your dwelling, but only if we endure and allow ourselves, and I said allow ourselves, to be made in the image of Yahweh. Now, I want you to think about this. Yahweh is not looking for incredible people. He's looking for credible ones. And credibility comes through integrity. Now, I want to leave you with this quote. Strong character is a non-negotiable requirement for achieving our goals and dreams. Every challenge we face on the journey to a better life has the potential to either take us down or make us stronger. There is no middle ground. When we face problems and hard times, it is the strength of our character that enables us to not only face the storm, but to turn it to our advantage. Remember, endurance comes through integrity. And with this, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today my topic is lifting the weight off your shoulders. I want to start by going over to Exodus 33, and I'm going to read from verse 18. It says, And Moshe said, So show me now your glory. And Yahweh said, I will make all my righteousness pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, Yahweh, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. And going over to the side note, it says, And according to the manner in which you see me doing this, cloaked as it were in the talit, and proclaiming the 13 attributes of mercy, do you teach Israel to do. The 13 attributes of Yahweh and his mercy are listed in Exodus 34, 6 through 14. These 13 attributes are almighty, merciful and compassionate, long-suffering, abounding, possessing righteousness and truth, keeping mercy, forgiving, punishes sin, heavenly Father, making the covenant with his, doing marvels, awesome, and zealous. And so, there are the 13 character traits that we are trying to put within us in becoming just like Yahweh. But I want to focus on the 7th one, and that is forgiving. If you remember in Matthew 18, verse 21, it says, Then Kepha came to him and asked, Teacher, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? For 7 times? Yeshua said to him, I do not say to you for 7 times, but for 70 times 7. So this was an important thing to Yeshua. That's why he wanted Kepha to forgive so much. The word forgiving means to be ready and willing to forgive. So Yahweh is always ready and willing to forgive anyone for anything that they do. One of the meanings of forgive is to stop blaming or feeling anger toward, pardon, or excuse. So this is one of the great examples that Yeshua set for us, to forgive one another. And he set that example in more ways than one. For example, when he was being hung, instead of thinking of all the ways that he could destroy the people with the power that he had, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's in Luke 23, verse 34. So we have choices for everything, life or death, righteousness or evil, obedience or disobedience. To be forgiving, we have a choice for that too. And just like for righteousness and keeping the laws, you get rewards or blessings when you do, and curses and consequences when you don't. When you can't let go of anger, it builds into resentment or grudges. It takes hold of you and envelopes your thoughts and your entire life. and it makes it difficult for you to enjoy life. And as we know from the peaceful solution, holding grudges is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And that's completely true. It's proven that bottling anger can hurt your heart. It also messes with your mental health, causing anxiety and stress. And when you have bitterness and anger, it creates a higher level of stress. It also makes a great impact on younger children and babies, causing them to grow up to have hatred and be unforgiving. And it's a law to love your neighbor as yourself. So that would be causing one of the little ones to sin. And if you remember in Matthew 18 verse 6, it says, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea." But moving on here, Yahweh tells us that we won't be forgiven unless we forgive others. In Yahaqob and Mark 11, verse 25, it says, "And when you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, that your Father who is in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your trespasses." And also in Luke 6, in verse 37, it says, "Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Do not take vengeance, and vengeance will not be taken upon you. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." So as you can see from the two scriptures there, we won't be forgiven unless we forgive each other. It's true that we get angry and upset when somebody hurts or harms us in any way. And we want them to be held accountable for whatever it is that they did. And that's why we have to learn to forgive. Another meaning of forgive is to overcome the feeling of resentment or revenge for the person who has done any wrong action. Because while nothing can undo the past of what somebody did to you, you can still forgive. And remember, nobody's perfect. They're all overcoming just like you are. So you should forgive them as Yahweh and Yeshua forgives you. In Colossians 3, in verse 13, it says, "Being patient with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, just as the Messiah forgave you, so you must also forgive." So it's really in our best interest to forgive others, and when we forgive, it releases us from anger, and it helps us to heal inwardly. So I'm going to give you some tips to help you with letting go of your grudges. Number 1, acknowledge the problem. Don't deny it or try and blame it on anyone else, because think about it, it's really you. Number 2, share your feelings. Talk about it. It always helps. Number 3, switch places. And I don't mean move where you live or anything. I mean put yourself in the other person's shoes. How are they feeling? They probably don't even know that they did anything to get you upset. Number 4, accept what it is. If you're looking for an apology, just drop it because you're probably not going to get it. Number 5, don't dwell on it. Take the positive, let it go, and forgive. So we're supposed to be coming into unity, and if we're building up resentment for one another, we can't do that. We need all the strength that we have, both mentally and physically, to finish running this race. So drop all those senseless grudges that are just weighing you down more than you think. And let's forgive, not just for our well-being, but for the well-being of those around us. A wise man once said that the weak cannot forgive. Forgiveness is an attribute of the strong. So let's forgive and show Yahweh that we have the strength that we need to continue running this race and endure until the end. So I have some forgiving to do, so I'm going to get to it. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next teacher.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Today, my title is, What is it and how do I get it? Today, we are going to be talking about developing the character of Yahweh. And how to develop that character is the only way that gives us the tools we need to endure until the end. In the character book on page 4, it says our character defines what is important to us, what we believe in, and how we treat others. Over time, our choices and behavior will define who we are and what we will stand for or what we will fall for. Our character is an integral part of who we are. Whether the character is positive or negative depends on many factors.
which is our genetics, our family values, influences, experiences, choices, and our environment. Both environment and what you have inherited are powerful tools that shape you into who you are. The important part to remember is that your character and personality are not fixed like your skin and eye color. Character and personality can change and develop as you learn and experience new things. Genetics and family values from the character book on page 6 is, as you mature and grow, your parents share their values with you, just like their parents shared their values with them. Family members, babysitters, others, and teachers share their values with you and help to shape and mold your character as to who you are today. Our experience and our environments, these are the things that we go through, the people that we meet and interact with, and the places that we see. All of these things affect who we are. Our influence. An influence is something that has the ability to affect the way we think, feel, behave, and act. Influences can come in all different sizes. They can be positive or negative, bold or subtle. Our choices. Our choices make layers in our heart, which then become our character. We are willing to do, or what we are willing to do, and how people know us. An overseer talked about this in a sermon dated 3/8/2003, and he talks about every choice that we make puts a layer in our heart, and that's how Yahweh knows us, by our positive character, by our positive choices or by our negative choices, and that every choice goes into our genetics from the layering of our heart, which then teaches our children. And if we stop and we start using these positive character traits, then we're instilling in our children before they're ever born to have these positive character traits. And as children, we still have the time to learn now, even if those genetics are still born within us, to stop them and to change them to the right thing, so that our children will have them. The laws tell us what to do or what not to do. The Peaceful Solution explains to us how to do them. Like Overseer has been saying, don't just tell a child what to do, but explain to them how to do it. For example, the law says to sacrifice your every sacrifice. The Peaceful Solution teaches us that that is self-respect. You're defending your body from cancer and other diseases, and you're building your immune system. Taking the laws or the Peaceful Solution and applying them in your life, they become a part of you. And this is called integrity, which is the end result of internalizing positive character traits that you can clearly see in your actions and attitude. Internalizing means to make something, an attitude or idea, something important to us, that it becomes a part of who we are. By learning and letting Yahweh's laws to become a part of us, it will help us to endure, so that we can teach and guide those who are coming to Yahweh's house, and how they can obtain these character traits just how we already have, and they will internalize them, and they can become teachers for others. And another overseer quote was, "Through much tribulation we will endure. We will enter into the kingdom. Sometimes you wake up of a night bawling. It's not going to be easy on us. It's going to be harder than any generation before us. But you will endure it, and you will get it, and it will be forever." Here are a few character traits that Yahweh has that we have to obtain in order to endure until the end. In Exodus 33, it gives some of Yahweh's character traits, which is long-suffering, which we know is patient, being able to endure or withstand hardship. Merciful and compassionate, which is empathy, being able to understand how others are feeling and being able to work with other people. And forgiving, being humble, putting forth that attitude of being willing to serve and being willing to let go of things, not holding on to a grudge. In the end, we are all striving to attain a positive character traits. that Yahweh has so we can be like him. Even though it is in our genetics to not always do what is right, it is not fixed. We can change it. We have that choice. With our choices and environments, we have, and even our influences that we allow to take hold of us, which our influence, just like Brittany was saying, you have influences all around you, but you can't always choose what influences you are surrounded with, but you can choose which influences you allow to affect the way that you act. You have that option. Always remember, you are never too young to learn, and you are never too old to change. Put forth the effort to learn and put forth the effort to change so that we can endure until the end and teach others. And in the end, it will be worth it. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next teacher.
Shalom, you may be seated. The title of my speech today is, We Run This Race All Together. In Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, a very important topic is covered. It says, The reverence of Yahweh is the beginning, the first requirement, the chief part of knowledge, or wisdom. Now, our overseer has taught us much about reverencing Yahweh. In fact, he wrote an entire book about it, right? Reverencing Yahweh, the fourth book of Israel. And I'm going to read to you from the Reverence of Yahweh number 7, which is on page 125, and it's verse 5. And Pastor says here, If you remember, I've been working on explaining reverencing Yahweh in his house, or reverencing Yahweh by doing certain things in his house. That is the way it should be, because that is the way these scriptures are translated, and this is what it amounts to. Okay, doing certain things in Yahweh's house. It amounts to this: learning to reverence Yahweh, to reverence your teachers, and to learn to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I call that reverencing Yahweh in a nutshell, right? Because he put a whole book together on it, all these sermons. But let's focus on that very last part there, right? The second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. That is 2 laws, actually, on the 613. It's positive law, number 206, which is love your neighbor, whether a brother or an enemy as yourself. And then there's prohibitive law number 302, do not bear hatred for anyone. And both of those are found in the same scripture, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, which says, do not seek revenge, nor bear a grudge against one of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor, whether a brother or an enemy, as yourself. I am Yahweh, right? And when we know when that stamp is on there at the end, I am Yahweh, that means business, right? Okay, so there's the laws for us. Now consider this. In Yahaqob chapter 2, verse 8, it says, if you fulfill the royal law, according to the scripture, you must love your neighbor as yourself. You do righteousness. So not only did Yeshua say this is the second greatest commandment, right? And in it is loving each other. Here in Yahaqob, the book written for us in these last days to learn how to come to perfection, it's called the royal law. And sisters, are we not called the royal priesthood of Yahweh in 1 Kepha chapter 2, verse 9? A chosen generation, a royal priesthood. So, this is something we really need to take to heart, because it is written all over the scriptures to love your neighbor as yourself. All right, so we've established this, okay? We must do this. But who's our neighbor? All right, let's get this figured out here. From the acceptance unit, page 23, it says, this is in chapter 2, accepting diversity. It says, look around you. Look around you. Okay? Here, at home, if you're watching at home, or at far off places, notice that no two people are exactly alike. Even twins who may be physically identical can have character and personality traits that are completely opposite. In addition to our physical differences, we also have different cultures and values, which we've heard about today. And as you learned from the previous chapter, people do not choose their physical characteristics or where they were born. What we can choose, however, is to accept and value each person as a unique human being who deserves to be treated with 1, respect, 2, compassion, and 3, empathy. Now I want you to focus on those 3 words, sisters. Okay? That is the key there. All people should be accepted. And I don't know of any other place than the house of Yahweh where all people are accepted. You know, the overseer, he's our example, right? And years ago, he used to tell the story about someone who they wanted to get rid of some people that were here in the house of Yahweh because they thought maybe they were less desirable. You know, maybe they weren't, you know, the tidiest people or this or that. But the overseer said, no, I'd rather have 100 people like this than to be out in that world with 10,000 of them, right? He desires people who love Yahweh, who want to do the work of Yahweh, and who want to become perfect. And that's all that matters to him. And that should be all that matters to us too, sisters. So let's follow that attitude that Yisrayl Hawkins has. You know, it's the exact opposite of the world's, of Satan's idea. And say, I will work with anyone in the house of Yahweh. Just give me a job, right? So, the question of the day here. Can we learn to coexist and respect each other? Or will our differences continue to cause conflicts, hatred, and war? And we can think of that on the big scale of the world, but we definitely need to think about it on the scale of our house right here today, sisters, because we can cause conflicts, hatred, and war if we are not being considerate of these 3 things: respect, compassion, and empathy. Okay. So, we definitely did not pick our neighbors. Did you pick your neighbors? No, I didn't either. I mean, think about it. If we all came from the same geographical area, you know, in the same spot in Texas here, we all were born, raised here, it'd be just fine, right? We'd be fine. We'd be getting along with our neighbors. We'd understand one another. For crying out loud, it'd be so simple, right? No, but Yahweh picked us from everywhere, like previous speaker said, all over the face of the earth, from the ends of the earth, right? He brought our great overseer here. And he said, you can learn to live together, you can learn to work together, and you can learn to love one another. That's his goal for us, and that's what he sees for us in his kingdom. Okay, so that's the who, right? Okay, we know who we are now. Okay, so number 2. How do we accomplish this? This is no small task, is it? Because we're such different personalities, different walks of life, right? But we're running this race together. We all have the same goals in sight, right? Ushering in Yahweh's kingdom and making an end to sin forever. That's my goals. Are they yours? Yes, yes. And we have to run this race all together. There's no getting around that. I can't go in my house and run my race all by myself. It's not going to work. Okay, I got to get out of my house and I got to come here every week, right? I got to tune in. I got to be with y'all. I got to get in the work. We can't do all that. I mean, some work we can do at home, but you know, eventually you got to go out. Now, This is what our goal becomes on a daily, our short-term goals, on a daily basis, is to live peacefully with each other, okay? In order to love one another, our goal has got to be to live peacefully with one another. In Romans 12, chapter 18, and I recommend you read all of Romans 12. It's an amazingly profound chapter about what we need to do. And in verse 18 it says, if it is possible, as far it depends upon me, upon you, live peaceably with all men. And I would add with all women, right? Because that's our side here. Now, is it possible? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible, okay? He said, is it possible? As far as it depends on me. I have to choose to live peacefully, right? So, this is how we do it. Of course, it has to start somewhere. It has to start up here, in my brain, with my thoughts. Have you ever heard the saying, the problem is not what I'm thinking. The problem is not what you're thinking. The problem is what I think you're thinking. Yeah, that's the problem. In the self-control unit, page 14, it says, having negative thoughts about others can be just as dangerous as having negative thoughts about yourself. Negative thoughts about others comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people do things that get under your skin. They may frustrate you because you perceive their actions as unfair or mean. Thoughts like, he's so stupid, or I hate her, she's such a jerk, are only some examples of negative thoughts about others. Without self-control, thoughts like these have the potential to lead to violent behavior because they desensitize you to the fact that all people, remember we said that before, all people, even the ones who annoy you, are to be respected. And I'm sure sometimes I'm the person who annoys somebody. So, if we have people who we think annoy us, think about it, flip it around and think about yourself and say, do I have any annoying habits? Do I get on anybody's nerves from time to time? How do I want them to treat me? Okay? Let's move on here for time's sake. So, we have to have some positive self-talk going on, right? Because it starts there. Now, when a negative thought comes into your mind about another, you need to start thinking the opposite. You need to start thinking positive, and I'm talking to myself as well here. So, for example, someone's really getting on my last nerve. This is what I say. Or this is what I think up here in my head, and I'm talking to myself. They are a called out member of the House of Yahweh. They are doing Yahweh's work. They are striving to overcome, just like me. Use that empathy you want shown to you on that person. Consider what they may be going through. Even if you have no clue what they're going through, we don't need to know. We don't need to know, sisters, what everyone is going through, right? But we do need to understand they're going through something because they're in the house of Yahweh, right? And we are all tested to come to perfection. So every single one of us is going through something. So let's have that empathy and think those empathetic thoughts like we want done for us when it's our turn to be the annoying person. Number 2, we can achieve love for one another through this: positive communication, positive interactions. Now, started up here, right? Thoughts lead to feelings. Okay, so if I'm thinking these positive thoughts about this person, what's that going to lead to? Hi, how you doing today? You all right? Seem a little down. Versus, oh, I can't stand her, right? Those thoughts are gone because I erased them. I took my eraser and I erased them off the board. They're out of my mind. We have to do this, sisters. It's a must. It's the only way we're going to come into unity and endure in this time period. Remember, we're running a race together. If we don't put the effort in to have positive interactions with Yahweh's family now, like Pastor said, just, last Sabbath, he said, someone kicks you in the teeth, do they cut you off from Yahweh? No. You do. When you retaliate, when you bear a grudge against them for it, when you show any kind of anger or hatred towards them, we can't be cutting ourselves off from Yahweh now. It's just, we're so close to that finish line. We have to keep running. We must be mindful of how we speak to each other. It's so easy to say the wrong thing. Trust me, I know. Just the other day, things were going along great, and I said one word, and I saw something change, and I was like, oh no, I did not say the right thing, and I knew it. As I was saying it, I was like, oh, why don't you just stop yourself and say something kind, say something upbuilding. It's so stressful right now. We don't need more stress. But you know what? It taught me something, because the person, they did what the scriptures say, They came to me, and they said, look, I didn't like how you said that. And I was like, wow, thank you. I'm so sorry for doing that. And I should have stopped and thought, right? I should have took the time to consider, because, I love that person, and I don't want any problems there. I love each and every one of you, and I would never seek to hurt you intentionally. But even accidentally, we do it, don't we, sisters? But we got to be humble about it. We got to apologize quickly. And we got to get back on track with one another, because this work has got to keep going on, and we got to keep doing it. And we can. So Colossians 4:6 says, let your speech always be seasoned with love. Or always be with love. Seasoned, right, with salt. That you may know how you must answer each man. We can do that. We can practice that self-control. Matthew 5, okay, if we can follow these simple guidelines, you can look it up for yourself, but in the self-control unit on page 99, it talks about how to communicate properly, and we've all been taught it. But review it. It's really a refreshing review, just that one page. And if we can follow these simple guidelines, we will be called the sons and daughters of Yahweh, and we are promised to see Yahweh, and that's in Matthew 5, verses 8 through 9. And then in Hebrews 12:14 it says the same. Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no one will see Yahweh. So we must follow peace. We must search after it. We must strive for it, that daily searching and striving to be peaceful. So what really matters, sisters? This is the conclusion of the whole matter. In the acceptance unit on page 32 at the bottom, what really matters? Rather than focusing on one another's differences, let's focus on our similarities. After all, we are all human. We all want to be loved and needed. We want to fit in and be accepted. And we all have the potential to learn the value of a positive moral character. Do we not? Yes. And you know what? You're 99.9% there, right? Because that's what the overseer tells us and has been telling us. He knows we can do it, and we're going to do it. So remember, this is why we're doing this. This is our goal. We run this race all together, our hands on the plow forever, for we all love one another. Together, sin will stop forever. I'm so glad we are all still running this race together, sisters. Let's encourage one another to keep running and finish it together. And now I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech is Don't Let It Slip Away. And as you know, we've been talking about the vital role that character plays in our endurance. Now today I'm going to focus on the character trait of responsibility. Responsibility from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary means accountable or answerable for one's conduct and obligations. And that got me thinking, what are our obligations in the house of Yahweh? And if you find that in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. And it says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Reverence Yahweh by observing, keeping his laws, for this is the duty, the whole duty of man. So that tells us our obligations. So our obligations, our responsibilities, our duties, they're found in the laws of Yahweh. And Yahweh tells us the law requires us to be accountable to Yahweh through our prayer, through our studies, through coming to his Sabbath, through coming to his feast. And it requires us to be accountable to each other, as we just heard, the way we speak, the way we think about each other, the way we act towards one another. And oftentimes, in order to be accountable to Yahweh, we must be accountable to each other. But today, I want to focus on a way that we can be accountable to ourselves and to Yahweh. And that is how we manage our time. Because endurance, it's directly related to time. So what is time? Time is the indefinite progress of existence and events in the past, present, or future regarded as a whole. And that word progress really stuck out to me. Because in order for us to endure through this time, it means we have to be moving forward. And how do we move forward? We move forward through our faith in Yahweh. We have to reach a destination or a goal. And we know that our destination, our goal, is to make it into the kingdom of Yahweh and to accomplish our character and develop that integrity that Yahweh wants us to have. So, why do we need endurance? Because endurance is made up of the length of time and the conditions of that time. If the kingdom of Yahweh came in 1 week and we could have whatever we wanted that week and we could eat whatever we wanted and sleep however long we wanted and wake up whatever time we wanted, would there be no strength of character? It would be easy. But it's when the longer we endure adversity, we get tired, we get frustrated, we start to lose focus of our goal. And that's why Scripture tells us, do not grow weary of doing righteousness. So, what are some ways that we can help use our time wisely? I have a few tips. Number 1, keep your eye on the goal. We always hear the saying, remember your first love. Remember what it was like when you first came to the house of Yahweh. Or, remember why you wanted to stay in the house of Yahweh. And keep your eye on that and don't lose focus of it. Number 2 is don't let adversity diminish the value of your goal. And I know we're all guilty of this. We wake up in the morning, think of everything we have to do. Okay, how do I get through this day? How do I get through the next day? Before you know it, it's Sabbath and it starts all over again. And we live in a cycle. But we can't allow our everyday duties, our everyday responsibilities to let us lose focus of the blessing that it is to wake up every day, to have a place in the work of Yahweh every day, to come here on Sabbath every day, to sit at the feet of the teachers every Sabbath. These are all blessings that we can't forget the value and the importance that they hold. Number 3 is to use these tests and trials to motivate us instead of discourage us. And like the speaker said before, we've come this far, you can't turn back now. So use these things, the tests that you give to know, okay, I'm going through this, but I'm going to get something out of it. What am I going to get out of it? My position in Yahweh's kingdom. Number 4 is to remember the promises that Yahweh has given us. We have scripture after scripture that tells us, that he's not slack concerning his promises, that his word will not return void. And Habakkuk 2:3 tells us that though it seems slow, wait for it, because in the end, it will come. And how do we help ourselves remember these promises? We pray, in season and out of season. And we pray, the 3 times a day we're supposed to, when we wake up and when we go to sleep. But if you're having a moment that you're struggling, just take the time. Go, step aside, and say a prayer to Yahweh. Because he knows in that time that you need him, and he'll reward you with a test. And when he gives you that test, pass it, because he's helping you to move forward. The next step is to evaluate every day. At the end of every day, look back on your day. What are some things I need to improve on? What are some things that I did great? And use that to motivate you the next day, okay? So, yesterday I forgot to pray at 12 o'clock, so the next day I'm going to set an alarm and I'm going to pray. Little things like that get us closer to becoming perfect. The next one is the very important one. It's don't hide behind the word mistake. A lot of times we can say, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I accidentally did that. But the truth is, a Peace of Solution tells us that everything begins with a thought, a feeling, and then an action. And that action is a choice. And sometimes, yes, we make bad choices in moments of weaknesses, But don't give ourselves an excuse for it. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't say, okay, well, I did this because. Acts 3:19 tells us to repent. Yahweh knows we're going to make, choices, but he says to repent and then be converted and then determine in your mind not to make that choice again. And then the next point is to remember that there is a purpose. As the previous speakers before me said, this endurance, it's not just suffering. Yahweh just doesn't want to see us suffer. He's doing it to develop a character within us. He's working with us. He's grooming us. He's giving us an opportunity that many others don't have. And we're not just doing this for ourselves. There's those who don't have this opportunity. There's the microbes who are suffering because of the choices that man has made. There's the universe and all of those beings who are counting and waiting on us to use our opportunity in our time wisely. Now, Yahweh has given us this time. It's in our hands, so we cannot let it slip away. If you turn over to 1 Timothy 4:15, 1 Timothy 4:15, I'm going to start in verse 14. It said, "Do not neglect the gift that is in you, which is given to you through prophecy with the laying on the hands of the bodies of elders." Verse 15, "Set your love upon these things. Give yourself completely to them, that your progress may be evident to all." Verse 16, "Pay attention to yourself and to the doctrines. Continue in them. For in doing this, you will save both yourself and those who hear you." So this gift that Yahweh has given us, this time, this opportunity to develop our character, we have to give ourselves completely to it. We can't hold back a little bit. We can't hold on to 1 ounce of sin because, Scripture says a little leaven leavens the whole batch. We have to continue to strive to become who Yahweh wants us to be. And keep in mind that time is valuable. You can never get it back. So we cannot afford to let ourselves slack. Stay focused, keep the goal in sight, continue to fight with all your might. When adversity comes, don't turn away. Face it, lift your hands and pray. Yahweh's promises we will receive only if we try. Yahweh is faithful, he cannot lie. We're almost there, it won't be much longer. So be determined to let your faith in Yahweh grow stronger. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, saints of Yahweh, you may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh continue with each and every one of you as we wrap up our great program today. And I want to begin with this slide. You've already heard that word today, but I want you to look for a 4-letter word in that. Yeah, shout it out. Grit, that's right. That is the title of my speech today, and it takes true grit to stay in the house of Yahweh. It takes true grit to stay in the house of Yahweh. Now, how many of you have ever heard that expression by the overseer before? Absolutely. The most recent one that he said was in the 17th book of Israel, chapter 35, verse 67. Yahweh is bringing this glory to you by putting this squeeze on you. How many of you have been feeling squeezed, especially in preparations for the feast? And seeing if you can take it. You can take it, and you can stay. You can stay. Don't leave. Take it and stay. Get what they call in the movies as true grit. It's not true grit to kill people, to murder, to have hatred, conflict, strife. What is true grit is to bring peace to the earth under a world of hatred. And that's what this is all about. And that's what we're going to talk about as we wrap up today. In the character unit on page 18, it talks about that word integrity, and you've heard the definition, the end result of internalizing positive character, traits that can be clearly seen in your actions and your attitudes. When you look at the word grit, let's look at that word for a minute. Grit means a mental toughness, never giving up like the bulldog, fortitude, determination, courage,
Unyielding in the face of danger or hardships. These are our tests and our trials. We cannot be unyielding as we go through our tests and trials. And this ties in with our enduring. If we can endure the tests and if we can endure the trials, we have a place in the kingdom and we can take ownership of true grit. Another way to express integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness, the state of being whole or complete, undivided, a firm adherence to a moral code, which we call the 613 laws, the peaceful solution. You've heard about that. And I like to call it a moral compass to a peaceful life. You know how have you ever used a compass? You're trying to find out which direction you're going. The Peaceful Solution Character Education Program is our moral compass to a peaceful life. And of course, the more positive character traits we can practice and we take ownership of and we internalize and they come out in our actions and our attitudes, then the more moral, more perfect we can become, the better we can endure, and the more true grit we have. Now, Pastor reminded us on Isaac 27 that Yahweh's going to test us, and what an honor it is to be tested. Now, the Peaceful Solution focuses on our behavior and attitude, and we learn about that through all life, property, the environment. But it starts with us, sisters. It starts with us and how we choose to respond. We know we can't change anybody else, but sometimes it's even in how we treat ourselves. People can say, I can't do anything right. I know we've all said it. I don't deserve forgiveness. Or that other person makes me so mad, they push my buttons. Right? But our thoughts can either help us or hurt us. That's what one of the speakers said, and I thought that was a great point, because our thoughts are where it starts. It starts in the thought. And then we have to decide, what are we going to do with that thought? I like to use the expression of a foyer. When you come into a room, and in that foyer, that thought comes into that room, are you going to hold on to that thought? Or do you need to kick it out the door and say, no negative thoughts allowed here, get thee hence, right? So we have to evaluate them and decide, what are we going to hold on to at that time? In the Building Moral Excellence on page 57, it talks about the importance of building this positive character and maintaining it. Now, we know that it begins with our experiences, our influences, our choices. As we've talked about the GFC, everybody knows how important that is, but it's our interactions with those influences that determines what our actions are going to be. So what is another word for action? What is another word for action? Choices. I heard it. Great job. And this is how we have to pay. Those actions are always going to be our choices. It starts with the thought. We have our emotions. We bring them under control. And then we weigh our options with the tools that we've been given in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And at that point, we then decide, are we going to hang on to that and go in that direction? Or do we need to make a proper choice and turn things around? Now, in the Building Moral Excellence, page 95 through 97, I want to go back first to page 87 here. This is a very important part. On page 87, let's open up my book. Because this is where we all know we've fallen short. Okay? Even if you have engaged in some of the behavior, risky behavior, wrong choices, sin, whatever you want to put in there, you can choose to stop, turn your life around, and begin to develop positive character traits. Is it ever too late, sisters? The only time it is ever too late is if you walk out that gate and you choose never to come back. But as long as you remain here in the great house of Yahweh, you continue to confess your sins, you continue to strive for repentance, you get the guidance that you need, then you're going to make it into the kingdom. You're going to develop that true grit. So having made poor choices in the past does not mean you have to continue making them, those same choices in the future. So what it begins with, the first step, as one of our speakers talked about, is that value.
And I'm telling you, the most important start is valuing yourself. You have to respect yourself. If you have an attitude of I'm unworthy, I'm not worth anything, I can't do it, I'm a failure, and these negative thoughts run through your mind continually or even partly continually, then you're not going to get beyond that step. You have to go beyond that step. And the next step, of course, is to evaluate the types of influences in our lives. And then, of course, the last one, once we're doing these things, we're going to learn how to make choices that could either jeopardize our character development, or it's going to build that moral character within us. Okay, so now we're going to go to page 96. 96 in the Building Moral Excellence. What does it mean to maintain a positive character? This is what we're trying to do. We've got to endure. We've got to maintain. We've got to endure. We've got to maintain. So maintaining a positive character means that you must consistently make moral decisions using positive character traits. Consistency is an important part of character maintenance. That's what that internalizing, that integrity means, internalizing them and consistently making them a part of us, making that a habit, as the speakers before us spoke. So it shows that you can be relied on to always make the right choices in a situation, whether positive, we're always on a positive moral choice. So being able to resist negative influences today, but falling for them the next day, is not maintaining a positive character. And you've heard so many wonderful tips today of how to help you to overcome that repeated pattern. That's where we want to do, is we want to get rid of those repeated patterns in our lives and start going on towards a positive direction. So here on page 97, it gives you some great tips of how to do that. The first one is build that consistency to practice self-control. It starts with self-control, the foundation of all positive character, and then periodically evaluate your choices to determine your character. How many of us, we go to bed at night and we think, oh, let's see, how did I do today? I remember when I interacted with that one person, it just made me so upset because I knew I fell short. Anybody been in that situation? And we're growing enough now that we may have an interaction. I had one of those this week. And I went, I was mean. I was not respectful, and I fell short. And I couldn't wait to run back and try and fix it. Now, women, what it is sometimes we want to force and get our way. Do we recognize that? Sometimes we think, well, if we just put a little more pressure, maybe we'll get our way. Does that work? Will it ever bring peace? No. So that's when we recognize those things. We have to run back and say, please forgive me, I was a stupid jerk. And that helps us to make better choices. And then continue to discipline ourselves and be determined to make right choices. And recognize that there is a purpose for your life and set those positive, achievable goals. And you heard a lot about those achievable goals today. So as we're going through this process, I want to go over to, I know we're all preparing for the great Day of Atonement. And this is always a very emotional time for us. But I want to focus on the importance of patience and long-suffering joyfully. And in the 9th book of Israel, part 2, it states right there, you don't run out of patience. That's the one thing that he's wanting you to do. Don't run out of patience with your brother, with your sister, with your children, or even sisters with yourself. Okay? It takes true grit to stop and have patience at the moment. It takes true grit to long suffer a situation with joy. You know, it's one thing, you can long suffer and have an attitude. Or you can long suffer and have a joyful disposition about you that says, you can do this. You're supporting the other person. You're encouraging them to succeed as well. And I always fall back to the RESPOND acronym. And the first R is remain calm. If you can just repeat to yourself over and over again, when you get in those tight situations, remain calm, remain calm, remain calm. It does a lot to help us. So in Romans 5, 1 through 4 in the book of Yahweh, Romans 5, 1 through 4 in the book of Yahweh on page 876, it says, "Therefore, since we are justified through the faith, let us have peace with Yahweh through our King Yahshua Messiah, through whom we have gained access by the faith into this inherited pardon in which we now stand. And let us rejoice in the hope of the glory of Yahweh. And not only so, but let us also rejoice in our tribulation, because we know that tribulation produces patience, unswerving perseverance, and patience, maturity of character. That's what we're striving for. And character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because Yahweh has poured out his love into our minds by Spirit Holy, which he has given us. And this is what our goal is, to accomplish this. So sisters, no, we're not born with character. It must be learned. And character development, if you think about it, is correction. To develop positive character, you must experience and accept correction. Without correction, you won't have right knowledge. Without right knowledge, you won't develop understanding. Without understanding, there is no endurance. And without endurance, there is no motivation to remain in the house of Yahweh. So I encourage you to continue to set our minds in advance, be determined like the bulldog, and be patient, and continue to show Yahweh that we have the true grit that he has for us. And at this time, if you all please stand, we'll turn it over to the men.